Hi, boys and girls. All right, chapter 18. We're getting to the end. How many chapters are in this book? Let's see. 21. Almost done. The news of Serena's arrival on Bird Lake had finally reached the head man in charge of birds. He went out to look at her and was delighted. Then he gave an order to one of his keepers. What do you think the order is? See to it that she is pinioned this morning, right away, before she flies off and leaves us. That swan is a valuable bird. Make sure she doesn't get away. Louis was just waking from his nap when he saw the two keepers approaching Serena, who was standing on a shore near the ornamental fence. One keeper carried a large net with a long handle. The other carried surgical instruments. They were sneaking up on Serena from behind, very slowly and quietly. Louis knew right away what they were up to. He grew hot with rage. If those men succeeded in catching Serena and cutting a wingtip, all his plans would go wrong. She could never fly away to a lonely lake with him. She would have to remain in Philadelphia the rest of her life. A horrible fate. This is my moment, thought Louis. Nobody is going to clip my love's wings while I'm around. He hustled over to the island and stripped for action. He chucked his trumpet and all of his other stuff under a willow tree. Then he returned to the water and he waited for the right time to attack. The keeper holding the net was crawling quietly up on Serena from the rear. She did not notice him. She was just standing there, dreaming of Louis. Slowly, the keeper raised his net. As he did so, Louis went into action, lowering his long, powerful neck until it pointed out straight in front of him like a lance. He streaked across the water, straight at the keeper, his wings beating in the air, his feet beating the water. In a flash, he reached the scene and drove his strong bill straight into the seat of the man's pants. It was a well-aimed jab. The keeper doubled over in pain and dropped the net. The other keeper tried to grab Serena by her throat. Louis beat him over the head with his wings, striking terrific blows and knocking the poor fellow off his feet. Surgical instruments bounced into the air. The net fell into the water. One keeper groaned and held his hand on his behind, where he had been stabbed. The other keeper lay on the ground, almost knocked out. Serena slipped quickly into the water and glided gracefully away. Louis followed. He motioned for her to stay in the lake. Do you like the picture? He motioned for her to stay on the lake. Then he raced back to the island, grabbed his trumpet, his slate, his chalk pencil, his medal, and his money bag, and flew over the balustrade and walked boldly into the birdhouse. He was still mad. He went straight to the office of the head man in charge of birds and rapped on the door. "Come in," said the voice. Louis entered. The head man was seated at his desk. "Hello, Louis," he said. "Caho!" replied Louis through his trumpet. "What's on your mind?" asked the man. Louis placed his trumpet on the floor and took his slate and chalk pencil from his neck. "I'm in love," he wrote. The head man leaned back in his chair and put his hands behind his head, like this. His face had a faraway look. He gazed out the window for a moment in silence. "Well," he said, "it's natural that you're in love. You're young, you're talented. In a couple of months, spring will be here. All the birds fall in love in the springtime. I suppose you were in love with one of my young swans." "Serena," wrote Louis. "She arrived the day before yesterday. I used to know her slightly back in Montana. She loves me too." "That doesn't surprise me," said the head man. "You're a very unusual young cob. Any young swan would fall for you. You're a great trumpeter, one of the best. I'm delighted to hear about this love affair, Louis. You and your bride can stay right here safely in the oldest zoo in the United States." "I have other plans," he wrote. Then he set his slate down and raised his trumpet. They say that falling in love is wonderful. It was an old song by Irving Berlin. The room was filled with the sound of love. The head man had a dreamy look in his eyes. Louis set his horn down and took up the slate again. "I'm taking Serena away with me in a day or two," he wrote. "Oh, no, you're not," said the head man firmly. "Serena now belongs to the zoo. She is the property of the people of Philadelphia. She came here because of an act of God." "It wasn't an act of God," wrote Louis. "It was a high wind." "Well, anyway," said the head man, "she is my swan." "No, she's mine," wrote Louis. "She's mine by reason of the power of love, the greatest force on earth." The head man became thoughtful. "You can't take Serena from the zoo. She'll never fly again. My keepers clipped one of her wings a few minutes ago." "They tried to," wrote Louis, "but I beat them up." The head man looked surprised. "Was it a good fight?" "It was a fair fight," replied Louis. "They were sneaking up on her from behind, so I sneaked up on them from behind. They hardly knew what hit them." The head man chuckled. "I wish I'd seen it," he said. "But look here, Louis, you've got to realize the position I'm in. I have a duty to the people of Philadelphia. Within the last couple months, I've acquired 2 rare birds by accident. You and Serena. 2 trumpeter swans? One arrived here blown by a gale, the other to keep a nightclub engagement. The whole business is most unusual for a zoo. I have my responsibility to the public. It is my duty as head man in charge of birds to see that Serena stays. You yourself, of course, are free to leave when you want to, because Mr. Lucas insisted that you remain free when we arranged for your Sunday concerts. But in Serena's case, well, Louis, she's got to have her left wingtip amputated. The zoo can't afford to lose a young, beautiful, valuable trumpeter swan just because you happen to be in love. Besides, I think you're making a great mistake. If you and Serena stay here, you'll be safe. You'll have no enemies. You'll have no worries about your children. No fox, no otter, no coyote will ever attack you with intent to kill. You'll never go hungry. You'll never get shot. You'll never die of lead poisoning from eating a shotgun pellet at the bottom of the natural lakes and ponds. Your cygnets will be hatched each spring and will live a long life in perfect ease and comfort. What more can a young cob ask?" "Freedom," replied Louis on his slate. "Safety is all well and good. I prefer freedom." With that, he picked up his trumpet and played "Button Up Your Overcoat When the Wind Blows Free." The head man smiled. He knew just what Louis meant. For a while, the two remained silent. Louis put his trumpet aside. Then he wrote, "I ask 2 favors. First, put off the operation on Serena until after Christmas. I guarantee she won't try to escape. Second, let me send a telegram." "Okay, Louis," replied the head man, and he handed Louis a sheet of paper and a pencil. Louis wrote out a telegram to Sam Beaver. It said, "Am in the Philadelphia Zoo. This is an emergency. Come at once. I will pay for your plane fare. Am now wealthy. Signed, Louis." He handed the telegram to the head man along with $4 from his money bag. The head man was astonished. In all his days in the zoo, this was the first time one of his birds had asked him to send a telegram. And of course, he didn't know who Sam Beaver was. But he sent the wire and ordered his keepers to let Serena alone for a few days, which they were glad to do. Louis thanked him and left. He returned to Serena. They spent the day happily together, bathing, swimming, eating, drinking, and showing each other in 1,000 small ways how much they loved each other. Sam arrived at the zoo only the day after Christmas. He was equipped as though he were going into the woods. Under one arm was a sleeping bag, neatly rolled. On his back was a rucksack containing his toothbrush, his comb, a clean shirt, a hand axe, a pocket compass, his notebook, a pencil, and some food. In his belt was a hunting knife. Sam was 14 now and big for his age. He had never seen a large zoo. He and Louis were overjoyed to see each other again. Louis introduced Sam to Serena. Then he opened his money bag and showed Sam his earnings. $100 bills, $50 bills, $20 bills, tens, fives, and ones, and even some silver coins. A great pile. Goodness, thought Sam. I hope she's not marrying him for his money. Louis took his slate and told Sam about the fight with the keepers and about how the head man wanted to keep Serena captive by clipping the tip of one wing. He told Sam it would ruin his life if Serena were to lose the power to fly. He explained that as soon as his father's debts were paid and the trumpet honestly belonged to him, he and Serena intended to leave civilization and return to a wild life. The sky, he wrote on his slate, is my living room. The woods are my parlor. The lonely lake is my bath. I can't remain behind a fence all my life. Neither can Serena. She's not built that way. Somehow or another, we must persuade the head man to let Serena go. Sam stretched out on the shore of Bird Lake and clasped his hands behind his back. He looked up at the great wide sky. It was clear blue with small white clouds floating slowly across. Sam knew how Louis felt about freedom. For a long time he lay there thinking. Ducks and geese swam slowly by, back and forth, an endless procession of captive birds. They seemed happy and well. Curiosity, Felicity, and Apathy, the three trumpeters, swam by and peered at the strange boy lying on the ground. Finally, Sam sat up. "Listen, Louis," he said. "How's this for an idea? You and Serena intend to raise a family every year, don't you?" "Certainly," replied Louis. "Okay," said Sam. "In every family of cygnets, there is always one that needs special care and protection. Bird Lake would be a perfect place for this little swan that needs extra security. It's a beautiful lake, Louis. It's a great zoo. If I can persuade the head man to let Serena remain free, would you be willing to donate one of your cygnets now and then if the zoo needs another swan for the lake? If you agree, I'll go right in and see the head man about the matter." It was now Louis's turn to think and think. After 5 minutes, he picked up his slate. "Very well," he wrote, "it's a deal." Then he picked up his trumpet. "Oh, ever in the greening spring," he played, "by bank and bough retiring." The waterfowl stopped swimming and listened. The keepers stopped what they were doing and listened. Sam listened. The head man in his office in the birdhouse laid down his pencil, leaned back in his chair, and listened. The sound of Louis's horn was in the air, and the whole world seemed better and brighter and wilder and freer and happier and dreamier. "That's a good tune," said Sam. "What is it?" "Oh, just something I made up myself," wrote Louis on his slate. Boys and girls, what do you think of that deal? Were you surprised that Louis was willing to give up one of the cygnets? Did you think he would do it? Did you think he wouldn't do it? Now, I knew that part of it because I read it last year, but the very first time I read this book, well, as an adult, the first time I read it again, I remember thinking, Louis didn't even ask Serena what she thought. And I thought, I wonder what she will think about giving up one of her babies. So there's some questions left to be answered, isn't there? Chapter 19. In almost everyone's life, there is one event that changes the whole course of his existence. The day Sam Beaver visited the Philadelphia Zoo was a turning point in his life. Up until that day, he had not been able to decide what he wanted to do when he grew up. The minute he saw the zoo, all his doubts vanished. He knew he wanted to work in a zoo. Wouldn't that be a perfect job for Sam? Sam loved every living thing, and a zoo was a great storehouse of living things. It has just about every creature that creeps or crawls or jumps or runs or flies or hides. Sam was eager to see them all, but he had Lewis's problem to solve first. He must save Serena from captivity. So he picked up his rucksack and his sleeping bag, and he walked into the birdhouse and entered the office. He walked tall and straight as though he were on a forest trail. The head man liked Sam's appearance and noticed that he looked a little like an Indian. "So you're Sam Beaver," said the head man as Sam advanced on him. "Why did you come here?" asked the head man. "To defend freedom," replied Sam. "I heard you intend to clip the wing of a swan. I am here to ask you not to do it." Sam sat down and they talked for a whole hour. Sam assured the head man that Lewis was an old friend. He told about discovering the swan's nest almost 3 years ago in Canada, and about how Lewis came into the world lacking a voice, about Lewis's attending school in Montana and learning to read and write, about the theft of the trumpet by Lewis's father, the old cob, and about Camp Kookooskoos and the swan boat in Boston. The head man listened with great attention, but he wasn't sure about believing a word of this strange tale. Then Sam explained his proposal for allowing Serena to go free instead of making a captive bird out of her. He said he thought it would be a good arrangement for the zoo because anytime they wanted a young trumpeter swan, Lewis would give them one of his cygnets. The head man was fascinated. "You mean to say you came all the way to Philadelphia to help a bird?" "Yes, sir," replied Sam. "I would go anywhere to help a bird. Besides, Lewis is special. He's an old friend. We went to the same school. You've got to admit, he's quite a bird." "He sure is," said the head man. "His Sunday afternoon concerts have been the biggest attraction the zoo has ever had. We had a gorilla once named Bamboo. He's dead now. Bamboo was great, but Lewis draws even more of a crowd than Bamboo did. We have a sea lion that draws big crowds, but nothing compared to Lewis when he plays that horn on Sunday afternoons. People go crazy. The music is good for the animals too. It soothes them. They forget the cares of the day. I'm going to miss Lewis when he's gone. The whole zoo will miss him terribly. I wish he'd stay and keep his bride right here. It would be just great." "Lewis would pine away in captivity. He would die," replied Sam. "He needs wild places, little ponds, swamps, cattails, red-winged blackbirds in the spring, the chorus of frogs, the cry of the loon at night. Lewis is following a dream. We must all follow a dream. Please let Serena go, sir. Please don't clip her wing." The head man closed his eyes. He was thinking of little lakes deep in the woods, of the color of bulrushes, the sound of night, and the chorus of frogs. He was thinking of swans' nests and eggs, and the hatching of eggs, and the cygnets following their father in single file. He was thinking of dreams that he had as a young man. "All right," he said suddenly, "Serena can go. We will not clip her wing. But how can I be sure that Lewis will bring me a young trumpeter swan when I need one? How do I know he's honest?" "He's an honorable bird," said Sam. "If he weren't honest and true to his word, he wouldn't have bothered to go out and earn a lot of money to pay the storekeeper back for the trumpet his father swiped." "How much money has Lewis got anyways?" asked the head man. "He's got $4,691.65. "Holy moly," said Sam. "We just counted it a few minutes ago. He received $100 from Camp Kookooskoos for playing bugle calls, and all he spent was 60 cents for postage stamps. So he arrived in Boston with $99.40. Then the swan boat man paid him $100 for 1 week's work. But he spent $3 in tips at the hotel when he spent the night. So he had $196.40 when he got to Philadelphia. The nightclub paid him $500 a week for 10 weeks, which came to $5,000, but he had to pay his agent 10% of the $5,000. And he also spent 75 cents for some new chalk pencils and $4 to send the telegram to me. So that makes a total of $4,691.65. It's a lot of money for a bird. Sure is, said the head man. It sure is. But he is going to pay for my airplane fare from Montana to Philadelphia and back again. That will bring the total down to $4,420.78. The head man looked staggered by these figures. That's still a lot of money for a bird, he said. What's he going to do with it all? He will give it to his father, the old cob. And what's he going to do with it? He will fly back to the music store in Billings and give it to the owner to pay for the stolen trumpet. Give all of it? Yes. But the trumpet isn't worth $4,420.78. I know, said Sam, but there was some damage to the store itself. The old cob was going like the dickens when he crashed through the plate glass window. He shook things up pretty badly. Yeah, said the head man, but it still wouldn't take all that money to make things right. I guess not, said Sam, but Louis has no use for money anymore, so he's going to turn it all over to the owner of the music store. The subject of money seemed to interest the head man greatly. He thought about how pleasant it would be not to have use for money. He leaned back in his chair. He found it hard to believe that one of his swans had been able to save more than $4,000 and that the money was right out there hanging around his neck in a money bag. When it comes to money, he said, birds have it easier than men do. When a bird earns some money, it's almost all clear profit. A bird doesn't have to go to the supermarket and buy a dozen eggs and a pound of butter and 2 rolls of paper towels and a TV dinner and a can of Ajax and a can of tomato juice and a pound and a half of ground round steak and a can of sliced peaches and 2 quarts of fat-free milk and a bottle of stuffed olives. A bird doesn't have to pay rent on a house or interest on a mortgage. A bird doesn't insure its life with an insurance company and then have to pay premiums on the policy. A bird doesn't own a car and buy gas and oil and pay for repairs on the car and take the car to the car wash and pay to get it washed. Animals and birds are lucky. They don't keep acquiring things the way men do. You can teach a monkey to drive a motorcycle, but I have never known a monkey to go out and buy a motorcycle. That's right, replied Sam. But some animals do like to acquire things, even though they don't pay anything for them. Such as, said the head man. A rat, said Sam. A rat will fix up a home for himself, but then he'll bring home all sorts of little objects, trinkets and stuff, anything he can find that catches his eye. You're right, said the head man. You're absolutely right, Sam. You seem to know quite a lot about animals. I like animals, said Sam. I love to watch them. Then come with me and we'll explore the zoo, said the head man, getting up from his chair. I don't feel like working anymore today. I'll show you the zoo. And away they went, the 2 of them. See Sam and the head man standing next to the big boulders that the bears are standing on? That night, Sam slept in the head man's office by special permission. He unrolled his sleeping bag on the floor and crawled in. The plane taking him back home would leave in the morning. Sam's head was full of everything he had seen at the zoo, and before he turned out the light, he took out his notebook out of his rucksack and wrote a poem. This is what he wrote. Sam Beaver's poem. Of all the places on land and sea, Philadelphia Zoo's the place for me. There's plenty to eat and a lot to do. There's a frigate bird and a tiny shrew. There's a vesper rat and a 2-toed sloth. It's fair to say that I like them both. There's a Canadian goose and a polar bear and things that come from everywhere. There's a lot of things you've never seen, like the kinkajou and the wolverine. You really have to go to the zoo to see a newborn wallaroo, or a fallow deer, or a white-tailed gnu. There are wonderful birds on Bird Lake, and there's a timber wolf and a hog-nosed snake. There are animals with great appeal, like the hummingbird and the harbor seal. There's pony rides, there's birds of prey, and something happening every day. There are wolves and foxes, hawks and owls, and a great big pit where the lion prowls. There are quiet pools and pleasant cages where reptiles lie and a tiger rages. The houses are clean, the keepers are kind, and one baboon has a pink behind. The entire aim of a well-kept zoo is to bring the animal world to you. Signed, Sam Beaver. Shall I guess what your favorite part was? Sam left the poem on the headman's desk. Early the next morning, long before the zoo people came to work, Sam left Philadelphia by plane. Louis and Serena went along with him to the airport. They wanted to wave goodbye. They also planned to leave Philadelphia right then and there and fly back to Montana. But the airport officials saw two big white birds out on the airstrip, and they raised a terrible fuss. The men on the control tower sent warning messages to the pilots of incoming planes. Members of the ground crew came piling out of buildings and rushing towards Louis and Serena to chase them away. Sam was sitting by the window inside the plane, ready for takeoff, and he saw the whole thing. Louis grabbed his trumpet. Off we go, he played, into the wild blue yonder. The notes carried across the airport and startled everyone. "Cahow! Cahow!" cried Louis. He put his trumpet away and started racing down the airstrip with Serena racing after him. Just then, Sam's plane started into the wind for the takeoff. The two swans flew alongside. They were in the air before the plane was, and flying fast. Sam waved from the window. Louis's life-saving medal gleamed in the morning sun. The plane rose and started to climb. Louis and Serena climbed fast too. "Goodbye, Philadelphia," thought Louis. "Goodbye, Bird Lake. Goodbye, nightclub." The plane, with its greater speed, gained on the swans, and they began to drop behind. For a little while they headed west, following the plane. Then Louis motioned to Serena that he was going to change course. He banked to the left and swung toward the south. "We'll go home by the southern route and take our time about it," he said to himself. And that's what they did. They flew south across Maryland and Virginia. They flew south across the Carolinas. They spent the night at Yamasee and saw huge oak trees with moss hanging from their branches. They visited the great swamps of Georgia and saw the alligator and listened to the mockingbird. They flew across Florida and spent a few days in a bayou where doves moaned in the cedars and little lizards crawled in the sun. They turned west into Louisiana. Then they turned north toward their home in the upper Red Rock Lake. What a triumphant return it would be. When he left Montana, Louis had been penniless. Now he was rich. When he left, he had been unknown. Now he was famous. When he left, he had been all alone in the world. Now he had his bride by his side, the swan that he loved. His medal was around his neck. His precious trumpet dangled in the breeze. His hard-earned money was in a bag. He had accomplished what he had set out to do, all in a few short months. Freedom felt so wonderful. Love felt so good. All right, boys and girls, go ahead and do your comprehension questions.